Hello, everybody, and welcome to the episode of Sports Tonight with yours truly. Now, today, I just have a few things that I want to talk about with the NFL. Won't be too long of an episode today, as I am recording this. It is currently July 30th, Sunday, at 9:50 Mountain Time. So, the biggest thing I want to speak on right now is the fact that Lamar Jackson of the Ravens now has a second receiving threat other than Mark Andrews and Odell Beckham Jr. after they traded away Marquise Brown last year. And a lot of people were questioning that decision, and I was one of those people. Didn't make a ton of sense. And now, I will say this, I think Lamar is a phenomenally talented quarterback in the NFL. I mean, there is a reason why he won the MVP so early on in his career. I just feel like the last couple of years, the talent around him hasn't been that strong, and so it's forced a lot of pressure onto his shoulders. And I think adding Odell will help lift some of that weight off, especially in the passing game, just because Odell might not have turned out to be what people thought he would be, but at this point, he's still a really solid receiving option for any team. And so, with that being said, I'm really interested to see how that all pans out for Lamar and the Ravens this coming year. Let's, I, Time will tell if they'll be able to make a deeper playoff run than they have in the past. Obviously, the Ravens won a Super Bowl against the 49ers right around 10 years ago against Colin Kaepernick. And they haven't really had a ton of playoff success since then. They've still been good, but they haven't had that deep postseason run like some other teams have had in the past few years. Like the 49ers have had a couple of those since. And so I'm personally really excited to see what happens with this moving forward and how it translates to on the field play for Lamar and the Ravens. When second biggest story I want to briefly touch on is Aaron Rodgers. This happened a little bit ago, but Aaron Rodgers' first season in New York with Jets fans and players on the Jets obviously got what they wanted. They don't have to rely on Zach Wilson anymore, which at this point in his career, even still, it's no surprise, and it shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone that Aaron Rodgers is still far better than Zach Wilson. I don't think anyone would challenge me on that notion in seriousness. Now, I'm it, I the question becomes, will that acquisition pan out? And I think the only way it pans out for the Jets is with a Super Bowl appearance and winning it. Other than that, I don't know if they're if that doesn't happen, I think you can't completely say it was worth what had to happen in order to get Rodgers to New York. I think it'll make the AFC more interesting. Perhaps a team that can contend with Buffalo in that division, Miami, good, good team, and then obviously Cincinnati and the Chiefs, who have respectively been in the Super Bowl the last 3 seasons together. And so I'm not sure if at this point pick the Jets over any of those teams, except perhaps Miami, just because I'm not sure what's gonna end up happening with Tua after all the drama last year. And so I think the big thing that I'm interested in seeing for New York is how do the people that were on the team, especially the receiving core that was with them last year and coming over to this year, how do they play comparatively? On the surface, you would expect them to play better than they did last year with Zach Wilson and Mike White mostly. And so I suppose the big question is, will it end up with a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl reign? I think the defense is good. Obviously, they have a really good young corner in Sauce Gardner, who won Defensive Rookie of the Year this past year. They have Quentin Williams still on the defensive line. And so I'm interested to see what all happens with that. I think there's really good chance Gardner will improve. Quentin Williams is still good. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and I think a lot more folks around the league will be more inclined to tune into Jets games, in large part because Aaron Rodgers is now there. That's that situation where you really can never say that a game is out of reach. And there are very few quarterbacks in the league today that you could say that about, and even not that many more in the history of the league, of the sport. And so I think in those close games, that will bode well for New York more often than not, having Aaron Rodgers on their team, who has played in big games. Obviously, back-to-back MVP once upon a time, just a few years ago, actually. And you could have made a serious case at that point that he was, even later in his career, the best quarterback in the league. And he's still up there. He's still up in that upper echelon of guys. So with that, give just a short break just before we move on to some free agent news. Moving on to some news in the free agent world. Obviously, one question that everyone has been wondering is what is going to happen with the future of the running back position in the NFL. Obviously, the big name is Saquon Barkley, who has going to get a long-term deal, and same thing with Tony Pollard. So now both contract years again, and that begs the question: well, what happens now, and what's going to happen in the future? Now, it is my personal perspective that when it comes to running back, the running back position, there are a good amount of players that aren't on the level of Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, the really top of the top of guys, where you could make it work with some less well-known guys, less popular guys, the guys that most people would view not as good. And I think that just means that there's, within the coming years, there's going to be fewer and fewer teams willing to shell out the big bucks for running backs. Obviously, the league now has transformed to such a pass heavy offense as the first option, and running has kind of taken a back seat to that. And unless that changes, which frankly I don't see happening, I think the volume of long term contracts for running backs that are annually worth a lot are going to become fewer and fewer, apart from maybe tiny handful of people. Some of the ones that I just mentioned, although Josh Jacobs has been in a similar situation even now with Barkley and Pollard. As far as I've heard at this point in time, there hasn't been anything new about that, but perhaps I am wrong. However, I think that's where the league is going, and it's unfortunate, but just like the way NBA has shifted dramatically to the 3 point line in the 3 point shot, in large part due to analytics, and I'm sure that's part of what's happening here with the NFL. People are just analytically thinking that it's more worthwhile, beneficial to pass more, more likely to get big plays, score points, and whatnot. Second, second big thing coming out of free agency time period in the NFL is we now have a new highest paid quarterback annually in the league, and that man is Justin Herbert, who is making annually just over $52 million a year for the next 5 years. And in terms of that position, that's good for the quarterbacks because with Herbert, with Jalen Hurts being the highest for not that long, then Lamar Jackson, and then the same with Herbert, and evidently and inevitably, Joe Burrow is likely going to take that position, but and it's just going to keep building and building up. I mean, just 3 years ago, in 2020, Patrick Mahomes signed, at the time, the biggest quarterback contract at $50 million for 10 years. And now he's eighth on the list. And so it's just gonna keep going up, which makes sense. I mean, quarterbacks are the most important people to a team's success. I mean, for example, when Tom Brady left the New England Patriots in free agency to join the Tampa Bay, instantly he came in and won a Super Bowl when they hadn't been that good the years leading up to that. And that's just one example. And same sort of situation with Joe Burrow. Obviously, they didn't end up winning that Super Bowl, but it still led a team that hadn't been good in the years prior to the Super Bowl in his second season, his first fully healthy season. Now, obviously, it's a team sport, but you can't stress the importance of the quarterback position in today's NFL. And finally, to end it off, some big news recently where Jonathan Taylor, running back of the Indianapolis Colts, has requested a trade. And on top of that, someone in the Colts organization has said that they will not trade him. Now, I personally don't understand that logic because if he doesn't want to play for you and he's able to sit out because he doesn't want to play for you, at the end of the day, you're just paying him some money to just take up space. When instead, if you traded him, now what those details would be, I'm not yet sure, but you could at least get something in return and you could have people that are playing for you instead of just sitting on the sideline doing nothing. Like I've said, Amy Lillard, I'm not going to really talk about it unless he is traded, if that happens, and same with Lillard. One final note is a few days ago, over the weekend, the NBA sent a memo to each team about and reached out to Damian Lillard and his agent about whether or not they specifically called teams and told them he wouldn't play for them, so don't trade for him. To every team except the Miami Heat. Now, whether that happened or not, I don't know. But it's interesting. Thought it would be worthwhile to mention. And so, with that, that is all that I have for this evening. Thank you for listening. I'll be back soon. Peace.